Good afternoon, welcome to Rundlii Gaming. We're going to be doing a video. This one will be on the game by Queen Games. This one is called Lost Legends. This one was done by Mike Elliott. Mike Elliott has made quite a bit of different games, so it's quite a bit of stuff that he's worked on. But we're going over this specific game of Lost Legends. Now, in this particular game, it is a drafting game with a dungeon crawl kind of feel to it. So what you're doing is you're going through these particular dungeons, and there's going to be a little bit more stuff on the table here because it's actually the Kickstarter version. So it does come with an extra deck here, as well as these gems. I think if you have retail version, you would not have these gems, and you also don't have this deck. And there's also one of these character sheets that comes with the Kickstarter version, but I think you can get those on like Board Game Geek at an additional cost as well. But you're going to have an item deck for each level. So let's say that, because this is actually the first area that you can go to, the second area that you go to, and the third area you go to. As you go to each area, you're going to progressively get better items. You're going to have to fight stronger monsters. So it has its pros and cons to it. But also the benefits you get for killing those particular monsters in higher level dungeons will eventually get better as well. At the start of the game itself, you're going to pick up a particular character. The characters do differ a little bit. There's not a drastic difference in how they are set up, but some of them are obviously geared a little bit more towards specific things than the others are. For example, this particular one here, he looks more like a warrior or fighter type class. He's going to start out with 4 health, so you're going to put the little gold token down on the spot here. And then you have a blue one, which is for mana. He actually starts out with 0. Now you can get some later, like if he wants to delve a little further into either magic or something else. Whereas this one here starts out with only 3 health, but 1 mana, so it's a little bit different of a setup. You're also going to have skills in the top corner here as well. For example, this one starts out with a sword and a shield. Well, it's more of a armor is what it's supposed to resemble. And then on this one you have a sword and a bow. So these skills you begin with are also going to be a little bit different as well. And then also you'll take one of these black cubes and then you will drop them on your experience track. Because you also have a track around the outside here. What that does is it gives you, as you kill more monsters or if you defeat more difficult monsters within the run itself, you're going to get a certain amount of experience for each of them. And so as you progress through, you're going to get additional bonuses, like you can increase your max health, or you can increase your max mana, or you can just get 2 gold. Those are your different options that you have as far as moving it along the track there. And each of them are going to have different benefits, of course. You may need the 2 gold in order to buy better equipment, which might yield you a certain more benefit as well. Last thing on the character sheet here is you have 6 gold, and this one also has 6 gold. So they start out with the same amount of money. So we'll go ahead and put that down here. So I gave them 2 2s and 2 1s, just to make it a little bit easier to make change. And there will be a few more things we'll explain about the character sheet once we start breaking up cards. This is actually a 3 to 5 player game. For demonstration purposes, I'm only going to put 2 on here, just mostly because of table space and all that. But this should be plenty as far as just explaining how the game itself works for you. But normally you'd have at least 3 players at this table, so pretend there's 1 more if you wanted to. Otherwise, some other things. For the most part, all these cubes and yellow circles here, they're more specifically just for the values of your character sheet. The gems here are actually for representing these ones here, which are just victory points. Pretty much, instead of using these victory point tokens, you could use the gems instead. And that's pretty much the only thing that they do is they replace those. This is damage tokens. The damage tokens will go on to anything that you do damage to but do not kill. You'll basically just tack those onto that monster in order to show that you've done previous damage to it. Lastly, this other deck that I mentioned, this, if you choose, can replace the first level dungeon. It has a lot more things to interact with in a dungeon, so it might be something a little more complex, but it's not really that much more complex. But it's supposed to be just a replacement for the first one if you choose to use it. It just has a lot more modifiers for the monsters and things like that. So a little bit more stuff to kind of keep track of and having to specialize your abilities in a certain way, things of that sort. The other thing we're going to go over here is we have trophies. Now normally you'd have these stacked, but you're going to have a few different trophies here, and we'll kind of explain a little bit more as far as when we start killing monsters. But effectively what these are is to annotate who accomplishes certain tasks before other people do. So, at this point, each player is going to draw 6 items. And for now, I'm just going to go ahead and show you what the items actually do. So this will not actually be the hands necessarily. But normally you would draw 6 cards, and then you get to choose one of these cards, and you pass all these cards to the next player. And they're going to have a couple different things that you have to take in consideration. So these are the 3 different types of weapons. You can get this one, which is a melee weapon. You have your magical weapon, and then you also have your ranged weapon. And these are going to be more applicable as far as when you're dealing with monsters. They're resistant against certain things, whereas other things may hurt them a little bit more. So to kind of give you an idea of how this is laid out, you have what type of weapon it is, which we've explained, and then there's a value on the top here. So on the top right, so on the top right, you're going to have the gold value here. This is how much it costs to buy it. If you were to buy this, it'll cost you 2. There is a discount below that of -1 if you have a sword. You cannot get that multiple times, but you can use each of those discounts once. Some of these will actually have multiple discounts on it, but you have to have each of those attributes in order to get each of the discounts, but you can only get each discount one time. So on this particular weapon is a battle axe. You can either use this for 1 melee damage or range damage, and then if you have a sword as part of your skills, like this guy starts out with a sword, and she also starts out with a sword. If I had this as his current weapon, he would get an additional attack because of that. So that would be a really nice benefit, because he'll actually be doing 2 damage with this as long as you currently have a skill for it. Alternatively, let's say if you could not use anything particularly in your hand, but you do need specific skills, what you can actually do is basically discard it, and there's a little stat on the bottom of the card here, if you turn it upside down, and you're actually going to slide that under your character sheet. Now at this particular point, you're going to see how his stat line is now changed. He now has 2 swords, or 2 melee, and an armor. So this will help him increase his particular stats. Now, most of the higher stats don't usually help a whole lot until like the second or third group. It progressively gets a little more difficult to actually get items, and sometimes having multiple swords or having multiple armor icons or magical icons are usually beneficial. So that is what you can do with like that particular card, for example. So you can either buy it or you can turn it into a skill. If you do turn it into a skill, then you're going to get 1 gold in the first time frame. If you turn it into a skill on the second one, you'll get 2 gold and 3 gold in the last one. So it also gives you a means of gaining gold as well. So basically you can discard a card, gain some gold, and it kind of benefits you a little bit further with that as well. This one is a magical staff. Again, this one costs 2, -1 if you currently have a staff skill. For example, it would cost him 2 because he does not have a staff. It would also cost her 2 because she also does not have a staff. But if you have like a wizard type character, this might be a little bit cheaper. So they can either, with this one it'll say do 1 damage if you have a, basically it's like a cane looking symbol. If you have a cane symbol, well, you automatically do 1 damage of either magical or melee. So it'd be like either whacking them with a stick or sort of a magical type of attack. Now you do an additional damage if you have a cane symbol as a stat. So you could do 2 damage if you have at least 1 cane symbol. Or if you do have mana that you want to spend, and it says max of 1, you can spend 1 of your mana. For example, let's say if she was using this particular staff, she could spend 1 of her mana in order to do an additional damage. Like that'd be really good for a wizard because the wizard's going to be able to shoot 3 damage a magical attack towards this particular individual if they use that and they use the mana in order to use it. So, lastly, you have your bows. The bow itself does 1 damage naturally, and it also does 1 additional damage if you have a bow icon appear. So she would do an additional, he would not, currently. This one costs 1, but there's a discount of 1 if you have a bow already. So for example, she could actually buy this for free if she wanted. It would cost him 1 currently. So that's where the skills kind of come into play, because the skills will help you gain equipment at a cheaper rate, and then you can utilize them a little bit better than other people as well. Another rule as far as weapons go, you can only have 1 of each type of weapon. So for example, you can only have 1 melee weapon, you can only have 1 magical weapon, you can only have 1 ranged weapon. If you ever get 2 of a particular one, you actually have to turn it into a skill by discarding it and putting it within your skill bracket. And then at that point you would also gain your gold because you basically scrap 1 of your equipment in order to get that. Next thing is armor. So let's pretend these are equipped. Now these are going to go into this side here, and it's kind of neat because they actually put some graphics on the side of the card itself to kind of show you where these would be located at. You can only have up to 3 items per area. So you have this area, this area, this area, and this area. So you can have up to 12 items total, which is quite a bit of stuff. Alright, for this one is your different types of equipment. So on this helmet here, it's a leather helmet. It'll cost you 1, but you reduce the cost by 1 if you currently have a armor symbol, like he would reduce it by 1. Now, in this particular case, you can reduce range damage to yourself by 1 automatically. Or you can exhaust it, which is basically to tap it. And if you tap it, you can also reduce a chaos damage by 1. But at that point, you can no longer use the item anymore. So it is kind of something that, if you use it, you can no longer use it for the rest of the round. Now at the end of each complete phase, you're going to re-untap everything. So once all the combat's finished for this entire time frame, you will be able to untap everything. So it's not completely gone forever, but it is something that can be risky if you do it early, but sometimes you just want to make sure that a certain amount of damage does not get through as well. So that's the leather helmet. The oak shield, you can reduce 1 melee or ranged attack damage, and this is for each of the attacks that happen. Cost you 2, you can reduce it by 1 if you have an armor skill. Leather armor, you can reduce a magical or a melee damage. Cost you money, you can reduce it by 1 if you have an armor symbol. This plays a very similar setup as the weapons go. You can only have one of each type. You can only have one armor, one shield, one helmet. So you cannot have two of the same. And lastly, we have these two areas here. They are going to be a little bit different. One's more of like a scroll type. It has a scroll symbol on it. These usually will go up in this section here. And then you also have like the amulet looking one. And these will go down here. And each of these will have different little abilities. Now, as far as these go, you cannot have two of the same. Now, that would also still apply for these, but however, you cannot get two melee weapons, so therefore you can't really get two of the same anyway. But you can never have two of the same items, regardless of where they're at on the board. And these will also give you additional benefits. For example, you may use one skill from the player on your right during gear up. So whenever you're making purchases, you can use this in order to use one of the skills to the person on your right. So whatever skills that they're grabbing, this kind of helps you with that, because then you can use that for the discounts as well. This other item here is you could exhaust this to deal 1 magical damage. Also, your melee damage, so any melee damage that you use or ranged damage you do can become magical as long as you have that. So that's a pretty nice little benefit as well. So that's effectively the gist of what the cards do. So we're going to kind of play through the first round, and I'll kind of give you a small glimpse of what you'll see kind of in H2. Also, normally we would organize these cards a little bit as well. There are numbers down here. It's like with most games that require a bunch of cards. It is based on the number of players you're going to have. So for example, if you had 3 players or 5 players, you might have that. So for example, if you're playing with 3 players, you would take out all the 4s and the 5s, etc. So the 3s will always be in there. But let's say if you have 4 players, you'll also include the 4s. If you have 5 players, you'll also include the 5s. Since, as I said, we're only demonstrating, we're only going to have the 2 players. And each of these players are going to get 6 cards. 5, 6. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Now each of these players are going to look over the stuff that they have here. And they're going to choose one of the items that they have in order to play on the table here. And that's why you're going to actually take out the 4s and the 5s, because it kind of gives the group enough weapons and armor to kind of do okay. Whereas you might end up getting a lot of extra stuff, like a lot of copies. For example, I have another lightning bolt and I have another evasion amulet. Whereas if I was only playing 3 players, I might get more 3s. It's usually the same type of items though, so it's not like you're getting any kind of like more powerful items. It's just, it kind of helps filter out the type of items you're going to receive. But as I mentioned, so what's going to happen is each player is going to take an item that they want to use. So for example, since he already has the armor symbol here, he's going to go ahead and buy this oak shield. It reduces it by 1. 3, 4, 5, 6. Yeah, so it reduces it by 1 because he has an armor symbol. So he's going to pay 1 coin. He's now going to pass this to the left. And I'm going to include another hand, even though we're not going to carry a character sheet with it. This player here is going to build they're going to grab a Sinister Glove. It basically just lets them use one of the stats of the person on their left. And then they're going to go ahead and place that there, because it's part of this section here. And then they'll also pass this to the side. And let's say they took some other card out. And so they pass the hand here to this player here. So now each player normally should have one item at this point. Now at this point they would proceed further. They would now choose another card. So now they can either grab some sort of scrolls, like they can grab rations, which will help them get more hit points. For example, they can raise, with this, if they have it in their inventory, their stuff, their max health is increased by 1, which will make it a little bit harder for them to die. He could just get more armor, because at this, he can get a magic robe, which might be beneficial as far as just playing the defensive game. But yeah, let's go ahead and grab... Well, we'll actually pay full value on this. We could also just scrap one of these two. Actually, let's go ahead and just buy this one, because we get a discount on it. So we're going to pay 1 on that. Oh, 1 on that. This player here is going to also choose 1. Now this does have some weapons and stuff, so they can either grab some short swords or they can grab a magical weapon. They also have throwing knives, which would be a good range weapon. They may go ahead and just grab this range weapon here. So they're going to go ahead and pay 1 for that, since they get a discount of 1 on it. And let's go ahead and take one of these out for that third player that's playing. And we're going to keep going with this. This will take a few rounds. So let's say they want to buy the sword here, reduce it by 1 because they have a sword, so it'll be free. They will pass this. This particular player already has a ranged item, so we're going to give them evasion. And that'll hopefully get them hit a little bit less. That will cost them 2 though. This player is going to discard another. Let's discard that. So these cards will keep being played until 5 cards have been played onto your 6. So you do not actually play all 6 cards, but you will play 5 of the cards. So at this point we know that each player gets 1 more card. And we'll get rid of that for this player. This player is going to gain this one here. And that's going to cost them an additional 1 as well. This one's just going to try to build the scroll here, which will cost them 2 since they do not actually have a cane. They're going to go ahead and discard that last card. So 4, we'll grab one up here. They're going to buy a short sword for free. They played 5 cards, so let's go with that. So now that is gear up phase. Now once you've done the gear up phase, at this point now you can move towards the monster phase. So we're going to remove this deck from the game because we're needing a little bit of space here. And you're going to take 3 of these monster cards per player. 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. Since we're pretending that third player's there, we're going to go ahead and grab our 9. Now at this point, each player, depending on who is decided to be the first player, is going to be the first one to go. Now first off, you're going to put 1 card in the center. And to kind of go over some information as far as what this entails here, each of these are going to have slightly different stats. So for example, you have those guys. Those ones. Alright, we'll go with that. And actually we'll grab one more. So now what each of these monsters are, they're going to represent a couple different things here. For example, you have a type, which is be in the top corner here. This is a dragon type. This is a, I guess like fast or wolf type, but it's like a wolf head symbol. This is like a monster symbol. I think it's supposed to be for like demons. And then you also have like your undead. So those are the types of symbols we have. Below that is going to be modifiers. Now what modifiers are for is, for example, if you hit a zombie with a melee weapon, it'll be divided by 2. So, you know, if you hit it for 4 damage, you're only going to do 2 damage instead of the 4. With the Reaper demons, everything's divided by 2, so regardless of what you hit it with, it cuts it in half. Then you have the Wyvern. This one is times 2 damage if you use a physical weapon on it. So in this case, melee weapons are actually going to be a lot more powerful against this particular one. But they're also a little bit stronger as well because they're at 5 hit points as compared to like the 2 and the 3. And then lastly you have the Plague Rats here, which magical weapons are divided by 2. So that is these modifiers up here. Now you have a couple of stuff on the bottom here. This one is worth, you'll see an arrow here, and this represents your experience chart here. So you'll get 1 experience if you kill this, 1, 2, 1. So if you kill that wyvern, he's worth twice as much experience, which might be a big deal if you're trying to get more experience than everybody else. The zombies worth 2 gold, because there'll be a little gold symbol next to it, 2 and 4. So that wyvern also is worth a lot more gold. Now to the side here, if this particular monster hits you, it's going to do 2 melee damage, and it's going to do 1 chaos damage. The green number is its health. So if you do 3 damage to it, this monster dies. This one will only do 1 melee damage to you. He only has 2 health. So he doesn't do a ton of damage, but he does prevent a lot of other damage. This one here only does 1 magical damage, but has 2 health. And this one does 2 magical damage, 1 chaos damage every time it attacks. Has 5 health. Sometimes they're going to have additional abilities. In this case, there is a charge ability, which means as soon as this particular monster comes towards the individual that it comes after, it's going to do 1 point of damage of chaos. So that automatically goes through unless you can prevent it, which some of these items do that. It just depends on if you're able to prevent it or not. But that is the layout of the monsters themselves. So as I said, first and foremost, you're going to put 1 monster in the center. So that wyvern is now in the center. Now, whoever the first player is will draw a card from the center here. So let's say the warrior here is going to be the first one to grab one. They grab the skeleton warrior. Their ranged attacks, if they decide to use any ranged attacks, is going to be divided by 2. And they also charge for 1 chaos damage. So at this point he can either burn a mana to reduce a chaos damage here, but he doesn't have any mana, so that won't work. So at that point he is going to have to take 1 damage automatically, just because of the charge. So if he kills this, it's worth 1 experience and 2 gold. This also does 2 range damage, so that is going to be a painful thing too. So at this point he decides, do I want to fight this particular monster, or do I want to try to take on this monster in here? And he's probably going to go ahead and just fight this one. So once he's decided that, yes, I'm going to take this monster, he's now locked into that particular one to fight it. Now at this point, this player is going to also choose... Well, actually, we're going to go ahead and just do the fight sequence for it too. For now, this one is... So we know that we're not going to use ranged, so we don't want to use the short bow because it divides it by 2. But we can use the melee damage here. Now, since we have a sword, we do 1 damage base, and since we have a sword, we'll do an additional damage, so we'll be doing 2 total with this right now. We also can use this to exhaust it and do 1 magical damage. This also allows you to refresh it if you spend a mana, so basically you can ready your lightning bolt if you wanted to. If you were using like a magic user, that might be a pretty neat thing as well. But you can exhaust a lot of these in order to benefit these. So what I might do in this particular case is use my short sword for 2 damage because I have a sword, and then exhaust this for a 3rd point of damage. And because I do 3 points of damage, it's going to wipe out his particular health because he only has the 3 health. Now, alternatively, if I actually had a bow in my skill set here, I might have actually been better off taking this guy here, because this particular one is double damage for ranged attacks. A lot of these monsters are going to have a little bit different setup, so even though you see this wyvern has this particular setup, a different wyvern may have a different stat line, so you do have to kind of look at each of them a little bit differently depending on what you draw. But let's say if I were to have fought this one instead, and I did have a bow icon, I would do 2 damage normally, times 2, be 4 damage, and then I could exhaust this for the 5th damage, and that would actually have been much more beneficial for me to attack. But since I don't have the bow icon, I'm going to run into a slight problem that all I'm going to do is the 1 damage, which then makes it 2 damage, and then all I can do is the 3rd damage from that. So right now, against this thing, it really doesn't make any difference if I use my melee weapon because I do 2 damage with my melee weapon, but I only do 1 with my bow. So in that case, it's just a matter of trying to figure out what's best for you. So in this case, I did kill it. Now there is another little icon on the bottom here if you turn it upside down, kind of similar to the icons for the gearing up. And you'll actually put this under your trophies. And one thing we haven't really went over much on trophies is trophies are going to be based on what you've killed, and they're going to earn you additional victory points, which are all these over here. So to kind of go over what each of these will do, first off I'm going to obtain this here. This is it's basically just a competition of who has the most of a particular thing. Since I'm the first one to get a skull icon, I am going to get this one. Once you obtain this, you immediately gain 1 victory point. So in this case, you can either get a gem or one of these. They're actually supposed to represent the same thing, but we'll grab gems. So I get a victory point for obtaining this. And then if I held it at the end of the round, I get an additional victory point every round. So that's also useful as well. Now this player is going to first draw one. This one also does the charge, so they're going to take 1 point of damage, which would be chaos damage. Oh, since they got the iron rations, their max health went up 1. So they're going to now reduce that by 1. And it is something they can exhaust to regain a health back, which might be beneficial at some point as well. So we know that this particular one reduces all damage in half. So we could just gear gun for that, and that might actually be a safe bet. So instead of taking this, normally what you would do is you would pass this to someone that does not currently have a monster. So we'll say that 3rd player that we're pretending kind of exists, you're going to pass that monster to them. And then you're going to take the monster in the center. And then you put a new monster in the center. So like this is the same thing as the other one, but this one is melee damage instead of range damage. So for this particular person, we are going to have to fight it now. And what we're going to use on this one is the bow. or sorry, the throwing knives, because the throwing knives are ranged attacks. Because we do one range damage normally, and then because we have a bow, we're going to do a second range damage, which is times 2, so we're going to do 4 range damage on it. So 1, 2, 3, 4. So I have 4 range damage on it. Now, because we did not kill it, it does get to attack us back. When we killed this guy over here, he did not actually hit us back because we killed it before it actually was able to swing. But because we did not kill this in the first strike, they are going to be able to swing on us. They're going to do 1 chaos damage and then 2 magical damage. So right now they're doing 3 damage to us. I am only at 3 health, but what I can actually do is exhaust this to reduce the magical damage by 2. Unfortunately, I cannot use it again in the future though, so at this point I'm only going to take the 1 chaos damage because I reduced the other 2. And then it's going to proceed with everyone else attacking. So let's say this person went back and forth and attacked. They defeated the monster. And let's say they got the trophy for it, etc. It will then go back to this player here. They will draw another monster. And at this point they can either choose to fight it or pass it to the next person that does not have a monster. If everyone currently has a monster, you cannot pass it. If you pass it, you grab the one in the center. So basically it's going to keep doing this over and over. So let's say they went ahead and fought. They went ahead and fought. This player came back. They went ahead and attacked their monster again. This time they'll kill it before it attacks them. So then they'll actually claim the bonuses off this as well. Now, I did mention earlier that the monsters do give a certain amount of experience, a certain amount of gold. So let's say when they killed the skeleton warrior here, because Lost Legend does kind of have a weird system for distribution of gold. Experience, you automatically get the experience. So because they killed the skeleton warrior earlier, they're going to get 1 experience. They're also going to get gold off of this, just like the kill for the wyvern did. Now how it works is you always get the first gold. So they are going to get the first gold, and then it's going to start going around the table for the rest of the gold. So the next player to your left is going to get a gold as well. And that's what happened with this one. And this was also 2 gold. They are going to get the first gold. They pass the next gold to the next player as well. They killed this one. They obtained the first gold, second gold, third gold, and 4th gold. They also killed this one, so they're going to get 1 gold for themselves, and then 1 gold for their player on the left. So it's kind of a weird distribution as far as how the gold works in the game, because you do not actually get all the reward for what you kill, except for the experience. The experience you'll definitely get all the reward for. Like in this case, they got the 2 experience, but the gold kind of is like a weird distribution system. So sometimes it may not be as beneficial to grab the higher gold values unless you think you can kill them quickly. In the case of a 3-player game though, because it's 4 gold, the 4th gold can come back to me, so I'm getting 2 gold out of the 4. So that could be so beneficial for you as well. And this is going to keep going around and around until each player has fought 3 monsters or died. If you get killed, you're not out permanently, you're just out for this particular time frame. So in the first dungeon, if you were killed, you're not going to come back until the second dungeon. So once everyone has finished that first dungeon, you're going to then move on to gearing up in the second dungeon and monsters in the second dungeon as well. And also any kind of death that occurs, you do lose one of your skills, so you do have to take a skill from the top of here and remove it from the game. So it does come with some downsides, and unfortunately that sometimes makes it a little bit harder to catch up if you did kind of poorly the first round through. But pretty much that is the basic gist of how the game runs itself. And I'll go over a little bit more detail about the trophies as well. As I mentioned, whoever has the most of a particular trophy is going to get this. So let's say if I have 1 undead over here, and then this person obtains 1 undead as well, they still own this trophy, until this person passes them. So it is something that you're kind of competing for. So let's say if this person went up to 2, this person now obtains it, and then they also get a victory point for it, just to annotate that they had it at some point. If they still have it at the end of the round, they get an additional victory point for having that. And there's only those 3 time frames, so it doesn't trigger a lot at the end of the turn, but... Alright, so... the other trophies we have here are the ones below it. And they actually have different values on it, but if you achieve 2 kills of undead, you're going to get this trophy here. So one of these. The first person to get 2 undead trophies is going to get the 6 point. The second person is 4, 3 then 2. Same thing with the wolves, same thing with the monster or the demons, and then the dragons. So that is these here. And again, you'll get higher points the sooner you do it. The dragons are worth a little bit more because generally they're a little bit harder to kill. And then you have these other trophies as well. Now these ones are the 3x, and I have one of each of the symbols on it. And what that represents is you have to get 3 of the same type of at least one of those types. So let's say if I get 3 dragons, I will then claim this particular one. And then the next person to get 3 will claim the next one. And that's worth 8 points, 6 points, 5 points, 4 points. So they're worth a little bit more than like your average one over here. The last one here is to get 1 of each type. If you get 1 of each of these 4 for your trophies, you'll get this particular reward here. So, and also at the end of each age, you'll restock everything. So for wherever your gold token is here, because that's actually your max health or your max mana, your cube is going to go back to wherever that's at. Because there are ways of raising it, whether it be through experience, or whether it be through some things that increase your stats naturally that way. They will go to a higher number later. So you could get up to a 9 on each of these. I've never seen that happen, but you can usually get up to 6, 7 pretty easily. And that's pretty much what you're going to be doing, is kind of rinse and repeat for each of these dungeons. And some of the things you have to take into consideration is that in the later dungeons, these get a lot more expensive. For example, this particular item here is a spell book. If I have a bow or a magical staff, the cane looking one, it's going to cost you -2. If you have an armor or a melee weapon, it's going to be -1. It costs 6 normally, so I mean it's going to be something that's very pricey to get. And then even later you're going to have even higher price things. Like this is the Dragon Slayer, and it's really, really powerful. But it costs 7. But it has 2 different discounts on it. So if you have a single sword up here, you reduce the cost by 2. So if you have 1 sword up here in your skills, it's going to cost you 5. But if you have another 2 swords, well, if you have 2 swords on that, you're also going to get another -2, which will then bring it down to 3, because at that point, you reduced it by quite a bit. And they have tons of just random items in here, and depending on how you build your character over the course of the game, it's going to be able to do different things. And you're also going to have certain things you're going to be really powerful against, and other things you're going to be like, I probably should pass that monster to someone else because it's probably going to hurt me quite a bit if I do that. So it's like a deck building, a drafting game that is a dungeon crawl, would be effectively how I'd explain it. The game itself ends once you go through each of the 3 areas here. And then you're going to get additional victory points based on a couple different factors here. First off, it'll be based on the amount of experience that you get. So for example, if you hit 16 experience, you'll get 8 victory points. 10, 13, 16, 20, and it'll show you on the board here. And then also, each player gains legend points as a total of his collected trophy token. So, as an example, if you take this 8 and you take this 8 and a 6 here, so 16, 22 victory points, that's additional victory points you're going to gain just because of the trophies you have. So that's where trophies become a big deal, because depending on which trophies you grab and when you grab them before everybody else, it's going to net you some additional victory points as well. Also, it'll be whoever has the most gold. Whoever has the most gold in the game at the end is going to gain an additional 6 victory points. The second most gold will be 3 victory points. At that point, whoever has the most victory points will win. And also, as I mentioned, you do get these victory points as well, so you'll calculate those in as well. And as I mentioned, it just goes through through the 3 dungeons that you're going to be fighting through. And it plays moderately quick once everyone kind of gets familiar with it. It may feel like it kind of drags the first playthrough a little bit, but once everyone gets a little more familiar with the game and understands what kind of items that they're looking at and kind of what items they might need to take later on. And also there will be the case too of which items you might want to put as skills, because sometimes the skills might be more beneficial for discounts in the future. But also, as you go to the second time frame here, a lot of these are going to be scrapped in order to get better equipment. And when you scrap those, they become skills anyway, so usually in the second time frame is when you're going to start picking up a lot more of your skills as well, which then reduce the cost of other things. But that is the game of Lost Legends. I do hope you enjoyed the video. We're going to be trying to always post at least one per week. Just kind of keep a good flow of games going through. So if you enjoyed this, definitely watch my other videos. There are more how-to-play videos of different other board games. Like and comment if you've enjoyed it. Thank you for watching Rundlii Gaming, and you have a good day.